Good evening, and today let's do a bit of a roundup of some important and yet underreported stories happening right now within the Trump administration, starting with a warning that President Trump issued to the country of Canada. Now, the backstory here is that amidst the rising tensions with the United States, Prime Minister Mike Carney of Canada traveled to Beijing last week in order to meet with Xi Jinping and to iron out some kind of a deal. Quote, Carney met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing, where he signed a series of agreements that included slashing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicle imports from 100% to 6.1% for the first 49,000 units in exchange for China cutting tariffs on Canadian canola from 85% to 15% until at least the end of the year. While in Beijing, Carney said Canada-China relations are entering a new era and that Ottawa's pursuit of a partnership with China sets us up well for the New World Order. That New World Order motif was then echoed by Mr. Carney at Davos, Switzerland, when he gave a speech at the World Economic Forum. Take a listen.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. Argue the middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. But I'd also say that great powers can afford for now to go it alone. They have the market size, the military capacity, and the leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers do not. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. This is the task of the middle powers.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment, I'd like to introduce today's sponsor, Cowboy Colostrum. Look, it's the new year, and I know that many people, myself included, we're looking to finally fix some of those nagging problems in our lives. And so if you want to finally fix your gut, if you want to make your hair healthier and stronger, and if you want to add some fresh, natural glow to your skin in 2026, then you need to be adding colostrum to your daily routine. And Cowboy Colostrum, they offer the highest quality bovine colostrum that you can get here in the U.S. It's 100% American made from 100% American grass-fed cows. Now, if you've never heard of colostrum before, I actually have mine here. This is the strawberry variety, and this is the chocolate, and I have the vanilla one kicking around here somewhere. It's great. Colostrum is that very, very first milk that's made in the lead up to as well as right after the calf is born. And then within a few days, the milk, it actually transitioned into normal milk. But for those very few days, it's this super nutrient dense and super antibody dense colostrum. And unlike other brands, Cowboy Colostrum is true first day whole colostrum rich in bioactives like immunoglobulins and growth factors. And it's not processed. It's not stripped down. It's really just the real thing. It's whole, full fat, high in protein colostrum. And I will mention that if you're an animal lover like I am, you don't have to worry. They only collect the surplus colostrum from the mom after the baby calf had their fill. So check them out. Right now, they're offering a great deal to our viewers, 25% off your entire order. And so check them out. Just head on over to cowboycolostrum.com/Roman and use promo code Roman at checkouts to get 25% off. That's again, promo code Roman, ROMAN. And I'll also throw all their links. You can find them down in the description box below. Cowboy Colostrum supports the show, so let's support them right back. The links will be down in the description box below.
However, President Trump is not just sitting back and watching this seismic shift happen without reacting to it. Instead, he put out a notice of his own saying that if Canada enters into some kind of a free trade agreement with China, especially if they wind up turning Canada into a drop-off port for China in order for them to send goods into the U.S., Canada will be slapped with a blanket 100% tariff on all their goods, which, by the way, is really a significant threat because if you look at a list of Canada's largest trading partners, the U.S. is number one and China is number two. But the difference between those two is chasmic. Canada exports more than $500 billion worth of goods to America, while to China, they only export roughly $30 billion worth of goods. And so no matter how good of a deal they might be able to strike up with the Chinese Communist Party, there is little to no way that that deal would offset a 100% tariff on $500 billion worth of trade. And compounding this whole problem for Canada is that, unfortunately, in July of this year, in July of 2026, the USMCA agreement is up for renewal. The USMCA is the United States, Mexico, Canada free trade agreement that's been giving preferential treatment to Canada in relation to the U.S. for the past 6 years now. Quote, Trump's Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick added that Trump may not allow Canada to maintain the second best trade deal with the United States when it comes time to renegotiate the USMCA, noting that Canada's current deal with the United States ranks second after Mexico. Under the USMCA, 85% of Canadian goods are exempt from tariffs, while products that don't comply with the trilateral deal face tariffs of 35%. Mexico's non-USMCA products are subject to 25% tariffs, meaning that Trump's threat comes at a time when there's an actual renegotiation of the status quo. Now, to be very specific, here's exactly what President Trump wrote to the Canadian Prime Minister in a public post. Quote, if Governor Carney thinks he is going to make Canada a drop-off port for China to send goods and products into the United States, he is sorely mistaken. China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. If Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then in a subsequent post, Trump added the following, quote, the last thing the world needs is to have China take over Canada. It's not going to happen or even come close to happening. And so we'll have to see where this war of words is going to lead to. For the Canadian side, there have been, you can say, mixed messages coming out after this threat from President Trump. For instance, immediately after this threat of tariffs, you had the Canadian minister who's responsible for trade relations with the U.S. basically come out with a well-worded statement stressing the importance of Canada-U.S. relations and adding that the Canadian government was not pursuing a free trade agreement with China. Quote, as the Prime Minister said this week, Canada and the United States have built a remarkable partnership in our economy and security, and we will remain focused on ensuring the future of that relationship will benefit workers and businesses on both sides of our border. There is no pursuit of a free trade deal with China. What was achieved was resolution on several important tariff issues. However, juxtaposing this statement on that very same day, you had the office of Mike Carney share out a promotional video highlighting the Prime Minister's recent trips to China and Qatar and writing in the caption for that video, quote, from China to Qatar to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Prime Minister Carney advanced Canada's economic and strategic interests, strengthening partnerships, diversifying trade, and attracting investment to support good jobs and long-term growth for Canadians. And so there you have it. Canada is really stuck between a rock and a hard place, with the Canadian government now having to basically thread the needle in a way that doesn't totally tank their economy, but still doesn't totally have them lose face as a sovereign nation on the world stage. It'll be interesting to see how the whole thing plays out leading up to the July renegotiation of the USMCA. If you'd like to read about the current tariff battle between the two, I'll throw several really good analysis pieces that have come out in the last week that I've read. You can find the links to those down in the description box below, which I should mention is that description box right below those like and subscribe buttons, both of which I hope you take a moment to smash so that this video can be picked up by the YouTube algorithm and shared out to ever more people. Thank you so much for that. A quick shout out to our new coffee sponsor, Hunter's Blend Coffee. It's a great brand run by patriots. The coffee is great. It's fresh. They actually source their beans from the top 6% of Q-graded beans. And then they roast and package it right here in the U.S. and ship it directly to your doorstep in vacuum sealed packages, super fresh. So check them out. The link will be down there in the description box below. They support the show. Let's support them right back. Now, moving along. In more domestic news, the Trump administration has recently ordered citizenship verifications to be conducted for all tenants that are currently living in federally funded housing. Quote, the Department of Housing and Urban Development has ordered immediate citizenship verification for all beneficiaries of HUD-funded housing across the United States to ensure that these benefits are not going to ineligible individuals such as illegal immigrants. Now, this order of theirs came on the heels of an audit that was conducted jointly by both the Department of Housing and Urban Development alongside the Department of Homeland Security. And that audit of the whole system it found some, I guess you can say, troubling anomalies. They found 25,000 deceased tenants, meaning people who were receiving these housing benefits despite being dead. Secondly, they found 6,000 ineligible non-American tenants, meaning non-U.S. citizens who were getting these housing vouchers. And then they also found 200,000 tenants who require eligibility verification, leading them to ultimately make the following statement, quote, "The Department of Housing and Urban Development announced that all public housing authorities and owners participating in HUD-funded housing have 30 days to take corrective actions to address these findings." Meaning, in a practical sense, that all public housing authorities nationwide have 30 days to run immigration status checks on their tenants. Failure to do so can lead to serious sanctions. And it is perhaps worth noting that the bigger reason that this really matters is because if you have thousands or even perhaps tens of thousands of illegal aliens or just non-citizens taking up these federally funded housing units, that basically directly takes a living place away from U.S. citizens. That's because there's a limited number of these housing units available. There are only so many Section 8 vouchers that can go around, and there is already a long line of U.S. citizens waiting to get federal housing. Quote, "There are hundreds of thousands of American families currently on housing wait lists across the United States, which makes it essential to ensure that limited resources go to only eligible families." And so that's pretty rough if you consider it. You have hundreds of thousands of American families waiting for that social safety net of federally funded housing, and they're on a waiting list, while an illegal alien family that crossed the border maybe in the last year or two was given priority placement in that exact same house. Let's wait 30 days to see what comes of the citizenship verification, and let's see what percentage of the housing was actually occupied by illegal aliens. We should hopefully know the number by sometime February or March. If you'd like to read this HUD notice for yourself, I'll throw a link to it. You can find it down in the description box below. Moving along, though, speaking of generally U.S. citizenship, just earlier this week, the Department of Justice announced that they had actually stripped the citizenship status from a man who happened to be a child sex offender. Quote, "The Southern District of Texas, McAllen Division, issued an order revoking the citizenship of Mr. Carlos Noe Gallegos, who was convicted of sexually assaulting a child prior to naturalizing and later withheld disclosing his illegal acts and accompanying conviction throughout his naturalization process." Now, I would like to quickly run through this particular man's story because what it demonstrates is the difficulty of stripping someone's naturalization status once they get it. And that basically it can only be done under very specific circumstances. And so let me give you the basic background of this particular story. Mr. Carlos Gallegos, he was born in Mexico. Then he married a U.S. citizen woman in the year 2001 and then became a green card holder in the year 2003. Then, starting in 2007, he began sexually assaulting his 7-year-old stepdaughter on multiple occasions. I won't go into the details, but if you for some reason want to read them, the court documents will be linked in the description box below. Now, in 2009, Mr. Gallegos applied to become a U.S. citizen. And on his application, there was a question about whether or not he had committed any crimes during the preceding 5-year period for which he had not been arrested. So whether or not he was arrested, the question was, had he committed any crimes? He said that he had not committed any crimes, and therefore, the very next year, he was granted U.S. citizenship in 2010. However, in 2016, he was indicted on 2 counts of aggravated sexual assault of a child. He took a plea deal, and he pled guilty to one of the counts. And he was given a fat sentence of 6 years of community supervision and a $1,000 fine for the crime of sexually assaulting a child. Regardless, in 2018, a lawsuit was filed by the feds in the Southern District of Texas to strip Mr. Gallegos of his citizenship, arguing that it was illegally procured due to his concealment of the material facts on his application. Quote, "According to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, denaturalization is not handled by the agency. Instead, revocation of naturalization can occur only in federal courts, adding that denaturalization can be pursued through a civil proceeding or as a result of a criminal conviction. 2 factors typically constitute the general grounds for revocation of naturalization: illegal procurement of naturalization or concealment of a material fact or willful misrepresentation." And indeed, after going through the details of his particular case, the courts ruled that this was indeed the case with Mr. Gallegos, and his U.S. citizenship was revoked. Attorney General Pam Bondi, in the general DOJ statement, she added the following, quote, "American citizenship is a privilege that this child-abusing monster never should have been able to attain. We will continue ensuring that anyone who conceal such conduct while obtaining naturalization is found out and stripped of their citizenship. But still, it's worth mentioning that this is the rare case where it can actually happen. It's very difficult to strip someone of their U.S. citizenship status unless, just like Mr. Galagos, there was a clear-cut crime committed in that 5-year window prior to applying, and he also lied about it on the application form. There have been some other high-profile cases recently, like there was a convicted drug trafficker over in Florida. There was a Colombian national wanted for robbery over in Minnesota, as well as a Peruvian national in Florida who was previously charged with 8 murders in his home country of Peru. But the number of these cases could really be counted on your fingers. Now, there has been some rhetoric recently coming from the Trump administration of doing this on a larger scale. For instance, this most recent Thanksgiving, you have President Trump write the following, quote, "Even as we have progressed technologically, immigration policy has eroded those gains and living conditions for many. I will permanently pause migration from all third world countries to allow the U.S. system to fully recover, terminate all of the millions of Biden illegal admissions, including those signed by Sleepy Joe Biden's autopen, and remove anyone who is not a net asset to the United States or is incapable of loving our country, end all federal benefits and subsidies to non-citizens of our country, denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility, and deport any foreign national who is a public charge, security risk, or non-compatible with Western civilization." And then at roughly a week later in December, when he was asked to clarify by a reporter, here's what President Trump added, quote, "We have criminals that come into our country and they were naturalized maybe through former President Joe Biden or somebody that didn't know what they were doing. If I have the power to do it, I'm not sure that I do, but if I do, I would denaturalize, absolutely." But again, setting everything else aside, just the denaturalization element of what President Trump said, it's extremely difficult. It's very rare. It's hard to do. And barring a substantial change to the law, the number of people who get denaturalized is really incredibly small. According to the public records I was able to pull, from 1990 up until 2017, the DOJ averaged about 11 denaturalization cases per year. Then under Trump's first term, it was about 42 per year. Under Biden's term, it was 16 per year. And under Trump's second term, thus far, the DOJ has brought 13 cases forward and won 8 of them. And so even at the maximum, there has maybe been 1,000 denaturalizations in the past 36 years, which is a tiny fraction of the 25 million people who are currently living in the United States as naturalized U.S. citizens. And so there you have it. If you'd like to learn more about either Mr. Galagos' specific case or denaturalization more broadly, I will throw several links and explainers down into the description box below this video if you'd like to dig into the weeds for yourself. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed. Most importantly, stay free.